Hello, everyone. I'm Chris. Welcome to our webinar, Supply Chains for Growth. Just an introduction as to who we are. So on the left there, you've got Alistair, and I'm Chris, and we are both part of the supply chain team here at IGD. We're going to be tag teaming our way through the webinar today, covering various aspects of the research that we produced recently. There'll be various opportunities to interact throughout the webinar, so keep an eye out for those, and we do have some time earmarked at the end of the session to answer some questions. So make note of any that come up along the way, and we'll do our best to get to those at the end of our time today. We're not expecting the webinar to take more than 45 minutes, so we're going to give you back 15 minutes into your day. So just a quick overview of what we're going to cover. So I've mentioned already, Supply Chains for Growth is the name of the webinar. That's actually the name of the research that we produced recently. So this is our flagship piece for the year, and it looks at what's going to happen from a supply chain perspective and how supply chains can be used to drive strategic value for organizations within the food and grocery industry. So we're going to explore that today. We're going to explore some of the things that are driving change within the industry. And particularly some of the shopper trends that are coming up that we see. And then we're going to look at what the key features are that we've pulled out of a supply chain for the future. So we've come up with 3 key characteristics, and we're going to explore those in depth. And then we're going to try and help you understand how you can prepare for those at the end of the session. So we're going to go through a couple of those key areas, and obviously you can access the report in its totality to check out the rest. So that's it in terms of the webinar. I just want to give you a bit of an understanding of who IGD is, or what IGD is. So for those of you that don't know, so IGD is primarily a research and training charity. So it helps the food and consumer goods industry deliver the needs of the public. And from a supply chain perspective, we try to inspire change through collaboration. So that's one of our primary aims. We try to do that to help businesses grow, be more efficient, and develop people. And a lot of what we do, we funnel through our supply chain analysis website. So that is a subscription site, and the types of things you'll find on that are thought leadership, case studies demonstrating the best of the things that we see from around the world, benchmarking, and some retailer snapshots to help you keep up to date with what's going on in the world of retail and with customers. So that is the IGD at sort of a top line on our supply chain initiative, supply chain analysis. And this is just a bit of a feel for where we are in terms of geography. So we are primarily based in the UK, but we do have offices in North America, in Canada, and we've also got an office now in Asia, in Singapore. So we've got a broad spread. These are some of the businesses you can see that we work with, and we actually access our businesses to help enrich the research that we produce. So it is a membership organisation, and we do, as I say, have a global spread. So before I take any more of your time, I'm going to hand over to Alistair, and he's going to take you through the first part of our webinar today.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, so we're going to start by looking at what it is that creates value in the supply chain, and then we'll move on to looking at external insight more widely. So we know that within the food and grocery market, the channels to reach those consumers are really proliferating, as well as the range of fulfillment options to get products to consumers. And we're really seeing people shopping in a wide range of different stores over a 4-week period or over a period of time. So yeah, there's some real channel proliferation, but we're also seeing that consumer expectations are being reset all the time as they experience new ways that technology is helping them in their lives. So not just in grocery, but in all sorts of different areas of their lives. So this is delivering a lot of convenience for consumers, but of course businesses in themselves have the danger of increasing costs there. And then as businesses, as food and grocery businesses, we can't easily rely anymore on growing population or growing affluence to sell more products. So we have to look for new ways of unlocking the growth that we need. And there's some examples of that on the screen. And we believe that it's here that excellence in supply chain can really start to contribute. So the time when supply chain departments were seen as a bit of a cost center in a business, they're largely behind us now. And supply chain's really playing a much more strategic role in creating value. And you know, there's a lot of evidence to say that that will just continue over time. And in fact, some retailers are already putting supply chain capabilities into their brand identity. You know, it's something that they're becoming famous for over a period of time, as you can see from some of these on the screen. And that really gives us a sense of the direction for the future. But to get there, we need to make some really bold changes, some bold moves, because disruption's coming at us more often. And that really means that supply chains have to be more comfortable with complexity. We can't look at the solutions that we've had in the past to answer these new questions that are coming up. And of course, speed is more and more important. We have to implement the plans that we make more quickly. But for us, we think that by looking again and reimagining what we think is possible in supply chain, we can deliver new value for shoppers and consumers, and more importantly, deliver it profitably. Okay. So that's a bit of the introduction. We're next going to look a little bit more at the external environment, because it's really important that if supply chain people are going to create new offerings for consumers, they clearly have to understand the world around them, the world of grocery shoppers and grocery retailing. Now, within IGD, we have 3 online services, and they are constantly delivering a flow of insights, you know, week by week on what's happening in retail, what are shoppers thinking, what's happening in supply chain. But this year, we've supplemented that with some major projects, some major pieces of research, which is our IGD Futures program. And you can see the reports on the screen now. All of those are free to download on the website. But what I've done is boiled down some of the key insights from particularly the shopper and the retail reports, looking at particularly how they will affect supply chain. So let's look at shoppers first. And what that research identified was a group of influencer shoppers who are quick to pick up on digital trends and are more vocal in sharing their views. For now, they are younger individuals and families or larger households, and their purchasing power is really growing quickly. So what are some of the points that we need to be aware of? They're very time conscious. They're much more driven by experiences, and that really means that shopping trips have to deliver efficiently on their mission. And for us in supply chain, what that means is that availability gaps will become less and less easily forgiven. Being more open to new products and excited by personalization, it means that shopping trips are going to change, and the blend of digital and physical brand experiences can be upgraded, for example, in categories like health and beauty. And the last point is that they're far more likely to make shopping decisions based on ethical or socially conscious factors. Now, everyone's got different view of what that means to them personally. But over time, it will create a route for brands and retailers to set themselves apart. Okay, so that's looking at shoppers. We're also seeing a lot of change in retailing, clearly. And we've talked a little bit already about this race to offer the greatest convenience and this proliferation of ways to get things done. And that's particularly true in urban environments where obviously population is also increasing particularly. But focusing on online isn't quite right. You know, physical stores still remain vitally important in grocery. That online shopping doesn't fit for everyone. People want to choose their produce. They sometimes enjoy the social aspect. or they need top-up shopping. But there are ways in which some of everyone's sort of shopping is likely to move more online, particularly things like routine purchases, laundry powder or laundry liquid, cereal, tinned goods, tea and coffee, these sort of things. And then the last thing is, because the barriers to entry are changing, are lowering, there's an opportunity for niche players to really demonstrate their local credentials, and also the major players like Amazon and Walmart, they want to try and demonstrate their local credentials. So they want to sort of partner up with these smaller niche brands as well. So we've seen some of those changes, around shopping and retailing. And for us, what that really means is that, supply chains can then be a fundamental building block of delivering commercially viable solutions. We need to be part of how those strategies are built and taken to market. And we can also offer new ways to build value within a team, things that haven't yet been considered. And there's a few examples on the screen at the moment. So this idea of supply chain driving consumer offerings, driving growth, is the key sort of background to our report right now. Okay, so having done that, what we've identified are some key features of what we believe are going to be leading supply chains who are driving that supply chain for those supply chains for growth. And I'm going to hand back over to Chris to take you through the first of those.
So thanks, Alistair. So first up, as our key feature we've called out is an ability to be self-disruptive and to be technologically adept. So what does that mean? I think it means being able to use technology to improve the supply chain processes that your organizations have. But I think the first part of that I'd like to focus on is around this self-disruption idea. So being brave enough to have a self-disruptive mindset, even in a business that is performing well and has a really efficient supply chain, making that change is not always the easiest thing to do. And being capable of doing so will help your business continually move forward rather than stagnating and being overtaken by competition. So that's the sort of the premise for it. But there's also a big part around data and how we can use data to improve the effectiveness of our supply chains. And encompassing that, I guess, wrapped around that is the ability of our people to use that technology and having the right expertise to make the most of the opportunity. So that's the first area. I'm going to go through the three sort of top line, and then we're going to dive deeper into them as we move through the webinar. The second one is trust and transparency. So something that's increasingly important to consumers, something that's seems to be really, really big this year. And where shoppers go, businesses in the industry will naturally follow. And this includes initiatives around, increasingly or making your supply chain or your business perform and act in a more sustainable way. And there's some really big questions in this area that require answers. I think what we're going to try and explore actually is how businesses can work better together to address some of these real challenges. And the last one, something we'll all be familiar with, that's the ability to work with a flexible omnichannel fulfillment network. So something that 10 years ago was probably not on the radar of a huge number of businesses, but something that's gone, through the roof in terms of its importance in the last few years. And that key element around flexibility is something that we try and pull out within that section. And the need to balance the sort of low-cost operation in an increasingly complex environment with speed and getting products to customers and consumers as quickly as possible. So I'm now going to dive into the first of those. So the first one, as you remember, is being able to self-disrupt and being technologically adept. So a few key features of that. So what do we mean by flexible production closer to the shopper? So new manufacturing techniques, I think, is something we want to call out. It's making the most of technology in this manufacturing and also the growing space to make use of things like additive manufacturing and vertical and urban agriculture as space becomes more of a premium. And you can see we've got a stat there: 59% of the respondents to our survey believe that urban and vertical agriculture facilities could be used to lower distribution costs, and that is something that's fairly revolutionary in most markets that I'm aware of. The second point there, so using data and advanced tools to do a better job. Well, that's something, again, I think there's increasing pressure on businesses to make the most of the data that they've got. There are, huge amounts of data being generated now by technology, often from IoT devices and things that, again, weren't there a few years ago. And it's how to make the most of that opportunity in the most efficient way. And actually data and analytics and the potential for things like machine learning and artificial intelligence is really grown, and that's something that businesses will need to support. And actually the whole thing's underpinned by a greater desire and ability to share information. So sharing information between businesses, sharing information between businesses and the shoppers and consumers that shop with those businesses. So that's where we are in terms of technology at a top line, but we've got some great examples here, and these are explored throughout the research. And we're going to call a few of these out in the webinar. The first one I'd just like to draw your attention to is a Morrisons initiative. So Morrisons, the UK retailer, this is something that they set out on a couple of years back now. So they worked with Blue Yonder to really revolutionise how they forecast demand for their products. So they've moved from a very rudimentary forecasting system into something that's quite cutting edge in a very short amount of time, and they've done that by embracing technology. So they've taken the approach of outsourcing the responsibility of that to a specialist, and I think that's something that we've called out again. It's around those collaborations and partnerships. So that's the approach that they've taken. And they've actually managed to turn business performance around, and this initiative has supported that. So they've managed to take 2 to 3 days inventory out of their network, which that is a significant number. And also they've done that at the same time while improving service. So that tension between inventory and service and the relationship between the two, they've managed to come out with a really positive outcome. And actually what that's contributed to is supporting growth. So they're performing really well in the UK market at the moment. So that's something that Morrisons have done to improve the customer experience. And actually there's another example here, which is a completely different space within the supply chain. So this is an example from North America, a business called Zestfresh. They have actually implemented sensor technology in the fields, essentially. So you can see there in the picture, guys picking products from the field, and actually what they're trying to do is they're trying to improve the freshness of the product that moves all the way through the supply chain to the shop, and they're also trying to reduce waste as well in the process. So what they've recognized is that not every product that's picked, despite being a very similar thing, is equal. So some may have slightly more days worth of life associated with them, and some slightly less. And that's all around how the product is handled and the conditions in the field itself. And they're able to assign a code to these products that they then send to the cloud. So you can see the connection between data and how to use the data coming through here. And they assign that product a code, which helps them distribute it to the most appropriate location. So they can send products with the shortest life to stores that are closer, and those that have the longest life to stores that are further away. So you get a customer win, something that you can really use as a way to pull customers into store, but you also get that operational win as well by reducing wastage. So there's just two examples of how to use data in a slightly different way. But data, it can be a bit of a divisive thing. It's not something that everyone instantly agrees with. We are seeing moves, particularly with this initiative in the UK that M&S have introduced, to really try and address that problem of culture and build a data-driven culture. So they have announced a partnership with a business called Decoded, and Decoded are a digital skills training business. So they've come up with this idea to train all of their head office personnel in digital skills and award them accreditations as and when they pass certain elements of that. But a key part of the strand is to really get that going from top down. So making sure that the board level personnel have those skills, And that, I think, we recognize is a key component of trying to embed a data-driven culture across sort of an organization, particularly as organizations become more disparate and disconnected. And the final one here is slightly less, I guess, sophisticated in terms of its approach. So Walmart in North America, they are, again, innovating in the space here of how to use data better. So they are developing a suite of apps that they make available to colleagues. And colleagues can use their smartphones in store to do various different things that help them to manage stock, manage customer requests. And these are actually part of a broader ecosystem that Walmart have developed. So you may or may not be aware that Walmart are trialing some robots in their stores that take on the role of doing some of the daily routines. And those robots actually can interact with the apps and send requests and notifications to store personnel as and when needed. So that's another great example of how Walmart is trying to instill a culture of being data-driven and moving away from this gut feel that has dominated in the past. So those are just a few examples, but I just wanted to come back to this statistic that was shown earlier on. So 56% say that manufacturers and retailers will share more data in future, and they'll do that more freely. So that, that's quite a positive outlook. But I wanted to try and understand some of the driving forces behind that. So we're gonna ask you a question now. What do you think is the most important factor in making this a reality? We've got 4 options for you. So you've got option A, which is better systems and infrastructure. You've got option B, which is established trading relationships, or establishing trusted relationships, sorry. Option C, which is a culture of using data-driven or data to drive action. And option B, the ability to demonstrate clear benefits. So if you just make your choice there, and then we'll just have a little bit of a look at the result and tell you what came out on top. Just give it a few seconds. Okay, so we're starting to get some results here, and the one that I predicted actually that would come first has come first, and it's all around establishing those trusted relationships. So I don't think I'm surprised by that. I think what you'll see if you read the report in its totality is that is something that emerges really, really strongly. And we do come on to that later on in the how you can prepare for the future section of the report. So do take a look at that. We've come to the end of this particular characteristic. So we're going to hand back over to Alistair, who's going to take you through transparency and trust.
Okay, thanks, Chris. All right, so transparency and trust, as Chris said, this is really sort of seems to be becoming much more important. Shoppers are demanding a lot more information about their products, and it's an area where businesses can create some advantage for themselves. Of course, food safety is the other sort of constant concern for businesses in our sector, and an increase in information around this will also give reassurance. But to do that, we're going to need more trusted platforms, and that'll need collaboration between companies to bring those to market. But the other area where this can create value is that by increasing the visibility of product flows, it'll help us to be able to see where there is waste or non-added value processes more easily. So we can save cost in that way, but also minimize our impact on the planet, minimize resource use. So it's an opportunity for businesses to get onto the front foot and really confront and lead these issues. Things like incentives for circularity, by making recycled products more in demand, products that are packaged in recycled materials and so on, then it increases the incentive for that kind of circular flow. And the final part is around the metrics that we use to judge business success. If we can rebalance decisions towards sustainability and transparency, then we'll see some big benefits. So again, as Chris did with the first characteristic, I've got some examples to demonstrate that. So for the first one, we're going to go to Canada and the Grocer Loblaws, who've announced that they're going to put some investment in with their to support Canadian growers and increase the amount of fresh produce that comes from within the country. Now, Canada has a relatively short growing season for many products, so they're quite reliant on imports. But customers very much want to buy local if they can, and so Loblaws have seen an opportunity here to take advantage of that, to help farmers make use of new growing technology like the vertical farming that Chris mentioned, like sort of sensors and more control over irrigation, and get more product produced in Canada. The second area of increasing trust is around sort of blockchain. So Carrefour have particularly seen this as part of the solution to give shoppers more confidence in the products they're buying. So they'll be using a blockchain-driven system to on a variety of products, and that creates some trust in where the product was grown and processed and packed, and then how it was transported. But in particular, it means that then consumers can use sort of smart packaging, QR codes on packaging, to see some of that information about where the products come from when they're in store. Now, what we see is that particularly is targeted at consumer seeing the benefit. But of course, the other part of blockchain is around business to business benefits. And that's where, other examples like the IBM Food Trust and things that we see from Walmart is focused on, all around traceability. But this one, interestingly, is much more about the consumer end there. So I talked a bit about metrics and the way that that's brought into business practice more generally. And what we've got here is a quote from Mars. It's really demonstrating that what gets measured gets managed. It's a bit of an old saying, but it is still true. And it's really about focusing on the true sort of end-to-end costings of a product by working on minimizing the sort of pushing of costs from one partner to another, or pulling of value, but also looking at long-term sustainability points. So you can see here the Chief Procurement and Sustainability Officer is saying that rather than just using cost and price as a decision in their purchasing, they'll be weighing up price and sustainability alongside each other. So you can see that it goes beyond just publishing a sort of CSR report into really changing the way that metrics drive business decision making and the way that people are incentivized within the business. Next example along similar lines is outside of our industry, but looking at Inditex, who are the owner of Zara, amongst others. Now, usually if they're used as a case study, it's around their fast and flexible supply chain to bring new trends to the market. But in this case, we're highlighting the fact that they're recognized as the world's leading retailer on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. And when you look at their annual report, it absolutely has sustainable practices at its heart. It's really making it very clear that creating long-term business value is critical. And to do that, they need to reduce their impact on resources, to improve the welfare of employees, and of course, to improve welfare in its associated supplier network. So it's possible that over time, or in the short term, there may be questions about how affordable some of these decisions might be. But we believe that the forward-looking businesses are really asking whether they can afford to be reactive and to really hold back on some of these decisions. It's not a case of can we afford to make these changes, but can we afford not to make these changes, particularly when you've got pressure from sort of social media and activist consumers and so on. Okay, so the final characteristic that we're going to go through now is around flexible omnichannel fulfillment. So online grocery does remain small in grocery, but it is, as I said earlier, big influence on consumers' expectations. People are combining online with offline shopping in a range of different ways. And increasingly, we don't we believe that there won't be silos in the way that we think about these two, that we need to just think about shopping, not online separate from offline. And the leading companies are going to need to make their fulfillment networks more flexible, need to change the way they decide where to hold stock and how they move it. It's very likely that companies are going to need to be thinking about how can they deliver in units and cases as well as in layers and pallets. So, and really, how can they use that network to ensure excellent availability everywhere, all the time? And the last point is around collaboration, again, which is really important in this area to minimize road miles, and in particular to minimize congestion. In urban environments, we can see that that congestion's almost as big an issue as the emissions and so on. Okay, so to again look at a few examples of where fulfillment is and changes in this area are being seen and where that's likely to go in the future. This example from Kroger is quite a small example. What you can do is order some of your fresh deli products in advance before you go into the store. So it's a great example of blending online and offline. So those products are then going to be available for you to pick up. You don't have to wait in the line, and you can get on with the rest of your shop. And it's quite a small example, as I said, but it's a concept that could easily be extended. It's not hard to imagine that you might sort of have some of your weekly basics or monthly basics on a subscription service, and you just kind of pick up your washing powder or cleaning products outside the store before you head inside to get those things that you want to spend time choosing, like your fruit and veg, your meat, your bread, and so on. And you can see in some of those categories, the sort of laundry and some of those kind of less engaging, let's say, branded categories, that people are trying to work out how can they take advantage of that. And we saw just a couple of weeks ago, P&G have redesigned one of their laundry products specifically for e-commerce. So it's really packaged in such a way that it can be easily boxed up and sent out as an online order product. It's a great example of a category that's likely to move in that direction. Another example here is a retailer called Target in the US. They're making a lot of strides to create that flexibility in their distribution network. They've said that their goal is to be America's easiest place to shop, and they've identified that fulfilling orders from store is their most cost-effective route. Every US household's within 10 miles of a Target store, so it kind of makes sense. But what they've done is, having introduced a range of different fulfillment services from store, drop in your boot, pick up from store, deliver to home, lots of different options. And they've had to, behind the scenes, re-engineer their distribution centers so that they're truly demand driven, so that what the stores need to fulfill both their offline and online orders can be delivered quickly and in whatever quantities they need. And by doing this, they've reduced the amount of storage space that they need in store, which means they've got more space to do other things like the online picking, like online delivery areas and pickups and so on. But of course, they're increasing their service to customers and improving their availability. Okay, now, when we think about omnichannel, for me, you don't have to look much further than China, and you see stores like Hema Fresh, where they really are combining technology with eating in store, picking your own fresh, or delivering online orders. Over on the right there, you can see how orders are picked by people quickly in store, sent up over a conveyor belt and into a dispatch area, and they're able to deliver products within a 3-kilometer area within 30 minutes of them being ordered. So, really seeing that the definition of omnichannel stepping on in China. The last bit to focus on here is around partnerships, and we've touched on collaboration a bit before. Here we've got JD.com, who are starting to call their they're using their distribution network not just for themselves, but they're offering it out to other companies, opening it up to the market. And Unilever earlier this year announced that they'd be using JD.com's logistics to distribute their products, not just to JD.com warehouses and stores, but to other retailers. And at a more local level, are we going to see more sharing of transport in that delivery sphere in order to get more and more vehicles off the road? It's currently increasingly an unviable sort of area. It's quite expensive and inefficient. More recently, we're seeing a big move towards unattended deliveries, and this at least enables the window for deliveries to be widened, so you've got less pressure on getting there within a certain period of time. Okay, so a quick recap. What would be interesting at this point would to just take a minute to note down in the chat box any thoughts that you've got on what you've already seen, or any questions and so on. It'd be really interesting to see any of that coming through. Okay, great. All right, thanks very much. There's there's a couple of comments coming in there which really echo what we've been talking about. I think the final point for me to put through here is that we've looked at these three key features, but and for us, we see it as an opportunity for supply chain teams to become the heroes of these company growth plans. We think they deliver solutions that can delight consumers at a more affordable cost, but it's really important that people are at the heart of this. So we haven't called it out as a specific area, but people are going to be what's needed to implement these more effectively. And that means effective teams who are sort of inspired by good quality leadership. They're empowered to experiment and learn from failure. It's really, I think, an important mindset shift over the coming years. And of course, skills that are constantly being updated to make sure that we're fit for the sort of, the changes that we're seeing in the modern supply chains. And with that, I'm going to hand over one last time to Chris.
Thank you, Alistair. So this is the final section of today's webinar, just before we take some questions at the end. Really important section, and it's how you prepare, I think, for some of the things that we've come forward with in this research. So clearly some quite stretching ideas, some quite challenging ideas that really take a lot of thought and a strategic vision on how your business can approach and get into a place where you exhibit these characteristics. So there are some things I think that we need to just call out before we move forward. So defining focus, really important. We've spoken again about some stretching ideas, but we can't forget that in the supply chain we're responsible for doing lots of things, and we need to make sure that we don't take our eye off the ball. And there are some examples of the things that are expected as sort of a minimum hygiene factor of a good supply chain there that must always be at the heart of what we do. But this is about what we do on top of that to really influence that growth agenda for business going forward. And I think the second one there is just about thinking about this opportunity to leapfrog over not just the competition, but also stages of development. So there isn't so much as a sequential line of actions that need to happen like maybe there were in the past. And particularly because technology is giving us some of the tools to jump straight over the top. And you see that demonstrated in markets like China that Alistair called out earlier on. So that opportunity is really there. And it's really about seeing the bigger picture and understanding where you sit within that and what your ambitions look like. And then the second, or the third one actually, sorry, is the choice as to whether you lead or follow. So we explored earlier on the Morrisons example where they were certainly not the first player to use AI to refine forecasts, but what they did was they recognized an opportunity to do something really, really quite quickly. So that they're a fast follower. And they've come up with a great solution, and there are pros and cons to both approaches. There are risks that you take as an organization if you choose to lead, and sometimes that's rewarding and sometimes it's not, but it needs to be a strategic decision and something that is really weighed up over the long term in terms of how that can benefit business. So going on to the areas where you can sort of go after to prepare for the future. Well, we've organised them around four key pillars. So if you're familiar with supply chain analysis, then we have these four key aspects that we call out as the aspects of a successful supply chain. So we've got a couple under each, 2 or 3 under each, and here they are top line. Now, I haven't got time to go through all of them today, but I did want to go through a couple before we end. But like I said, the report is available there at that URL you can see in the bottom right. You can download it and read it, and these are all fleshed out and with examples as well. The ones I did want to go through, the first one is around committing to trust, and we've spoken a bit about trust so far, but this is something that is going to become really, really important, particularly as we move into a more sort of data-rich environment. And you can see a quote there from Chris Tyers at Nestle. And he says gaining trust is a challenge, and I think we're all aware of that. But if you can show the benefits of the output of your initiatives that you're putting forward, that's really important, and that helps you gain that trust. And it needs to be done over the long term. So, where in the past we spoke about collaboration and then potentially that was done on an initiative by initiative basis, we talk more about partnerships now. Partnerships for the long term and things that can really endure into the future, and partnerships vertically and horizontally. So, different aspects to collaboration going forward. And true two-way partnerships is a really important feature there. So win-win scenarios where both sides actually get something out of it, where there is a common purpose, and often that common purpose is quite easy to find if you just look at what the customer wants. I think you can unite around a single vision for success. So that's one, and the second one is this idea around balanced scorecards. And this is, again, this can be quite challenging to think about. So we know most businesses that have a supply chain operation have a core set of traditional KPIs that I think we could all recognize if we saw them written down. But this is about doing something beyond that and finding ways to stretch your thinking, stretch your organization, and reward that process as well. So how do we do that? Increasingly we see that being through alignment of internal functions. So, uniting around common KPIs. And you can see that statistic there, which resonates. So, 71% think corporate sustainability reporting and KPIs will become more integrated. So something that, again, has come onto the radar really quite quickly, but become such a big issue that we are seeing businesses actually publish results and progress against those sustainability goals in their annual reports. So that's one for everyone to think about. As I said, there are 8 more actually that you can go and have a look at in the report, and like I said, they're supported with some examples and case studies. So before we get to the Q&A, so just a couple of points about the report. I've shown you where you can get it. Please download it and share it and read it. We've got more insight on SCA. So I mentioned at the start, we funnel a lot of what we do in terms of research through the supply chain analysis service. So if you have access to that, then by all means take a look. And if you don't, then you can get in touch with us and we can have a conversation. And then lastly, you can get in touch with us about some of the other things that we do. So we work on customized initiatives with organizations, and we also do a lot through the charitable side of the business as well, that may be of interest to you in terms of learning opportunities and those sorts of things. So that's it in terms of the webinar content. As I mentioned, we do have some time for some questions. So we'll give you a couple of minutes. If you've got a question, type it into the question box and we'll take a look and see if we can take a look at the answers. We've got time for at least a couple, I think, and we'll just give you a couple of minutes to get them in. Okay, so we've got one here. We've got one here come in on partnerships and collaboration. So that's something I've mentioned multiple times throughout the webinar so far. So the question is, partnerships and collaboration came up during the webinar. Where do you think the industry can have the biggest impact? I think the answer for me is around this area of sustainability. Sustainability is something that jumps out at me as something that can be addressed at an industry level. And there are two, I think, reasons for that. One, because some of the challenges that we face as an industry are so significant that we're never going to be able to solve them alone. And I'm not talking about an industry within a particular country. I'm talking about global challenges that will take focus from the entire food and grocery industry to solve. And the second one is it's a bit of a non-compete space in some aspects. So it's something that people can coalesce around and make progress on fairly quickly. And actually, it's something that doesn't have to go through, endless rounds of sort of legal review and all that sort of stuff. So that's something I think that businesses could really go after. And also, just to end on that, is it's really important to consumers, and the growing importance of that sustainability agenda to consumers, should tell us something within the industry about where our priorities should lie.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the other part is, some of the technology that can help to drive those areas of sustainability. I mean, blockchain's one, but it's not the only one. They will work best when they are put together in a collaborative way, across several companies, rather than just one company trying to do its own thing. I think it enables particularly consumers to get a more efficient solution at the end. So we see things like I suppose the idea of a transport sharing being done on a more collaborative manner, and that means that we can reduce the amount of vehicles on the road, but the way that could happen is through better technology solutions. So I think that's the other area that I'd add there around collaboration. So yeah, great. Okay, and then the other question that we've got here is around, what do you see being the biggest challenge for supply chains in the next 10 years? Okay, so well, biggest challenge in the next 10 years, that's quite a big question.
Narrowed it down.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, supply chains, we mentioned earlier about supply chains they have been seen as a cost center, and I think in a lot of cases have seen themselves as an operational team. Not necessarily they're delivering almost what the sales team want or what the marketing team want, or what the retailers want, and haven't necessarily always been thinking about the consumers. Some have, the leading, great businesses really have done that, but a lot haven't. And so the idea of getting more closely connected with consumers, what consumers want, and I think also being really sort of central within a business to what's going on, to being at the beginning of initiatives, rather than being kind of firefighting at the end. In both cases, those require a different mindset within supply chain, a different way of thinking about what is the job of a supply chain person. So I don't know if that's the biggest challenge, but it feels like quite a big challenge to me, because it's changing the way people see their jobs and see their work.
Yeah, I think I've got just a build on that. For me, it's around, I mentioned earlier on this idea where there's no sequential linear path of progression that business follow now, and there are almost an incalculable number of approaches to take, and that just seems to grow and grow and grow. And I think from a business perspective, and if a supply chain is going to influence that business perspective as we see it doing in future, it's about really understanding what the right approach is. The right approach from a cost and service point of view. So it's very easy to do an over-index on one to the detriment of the other. And I think making those choices and then looking at your organization and understanding, well, where are the skills gaps, where are the resources that we're going to need to make the most of the opportunity, and making sure that happens in a sort of cohesive, joined up way, that I think will challenge organizations really going forward. So that's just my build on Alistair's answer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're more or less at the end of the time now. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful. I would urge you to stay in touch if you have got any questions or things that you think we can help you with, or if you want to sign up to the newsletter, or you want to find out more about supply chain analysis, whatever it might be, there's contact details there. Don't hesitate to get in touch, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.